On this episode, we're going to be working on the vehicle that helped win the war. This is my 1943 Willys MB.
Welcome back to Catfish Motorsports. Today we're going to try something new by working on something really old. This is my 1943 Willys MB. This is a real World War II Jeep. We're going to get this thing back painted olive drab green again, make it look like it's ready to storm the beach of Normandy. So I've had this girl for a few years now. I actually bought this from an uncle of mine in Wisconsin. I drug it out from behind a barn where it was just rotting into the ground. Since I was a kid, it's been stored inside of a barn. But the storage got lost, and then it's just been sitting outside since for a number of years. And nothing deserves to die in a field in Wisconsin. So I talked them into selling it to me. I've had it here at my garage in Indiana for, I think, 3 years now. And over time, we've done a lot of work to it. I'll show some pictures of what it looked like when I brought it home. It had a setup for a snow plow on the front. That's why this big bumper is here. This is not factory. This is like way beefier than a factory bumper. So it had a big snow plow setup on the front. It was really beaten into the ground. And to be fair, like, our goal here is not to make this thing like a full restore. What we're doing here is more what Jeep people call a field restore. You know, the body's a bit rusty in places. I fixed a lot of it, but rather than making it pristine, I did a lot of kind of patching, you know, and there's a lot of farmer type repairs on this guy that it's had since the 60s, you know, where it had holes and patches. And you know, some of those I ground flat. For the most part, I'm not putting a whole bunch of filler in this thing. Any scars that it's earned throughout its life, it's going to get to keep for the most part. The big thing here is just to get the thing back painted OD green like some of these small parts already are. So by and large, these Jeeps come in two flavors. There's the Willys MB, which is what this one is. There's also the Ford GPW, which is what my uncle thought this was. He's a big Ford guy, and he swore up and down this was a GPW. It is not. What I think happened is it had a Ford head on it when I got it, and it said Ford right on the top, and I think he took that to mean the whole thing was a Ford, and that's just not the case. A lot of these Jeeps, you know, whether it was after they left military life or even during military life, the motor pool guys, the parts are all replaceable, so the motor pool guys just put on whatever was available to get the Jeep up and running again. And, you know, funny story, the only thing Ford on this thing was the head, and it was cracked, so jokes kind of write themselves there. It does still have its original serial number tag, which is really cool. The one on the glove compartment is missing, unfortunately. I got some reproduction stuff there. When I got this guy, man, it was in rough shape. So I've really put a lot of new parts on this over years. All the brake lines are new. I do have correct wheels for these, or closure to correct. I don't have combat wheels. Those are really hard to come by, and even when you do come by them, a lot of times they're not safe to use. So I do have correct wheels for these. I'm probably not going to put them on just because I don't want to buy tires for them. So as you can see, I've got the whole body in primer. I've done that over time. This is just Rust-Oleum rattle can red oxide primer, but it's sat for quite a while like this. Some parts, you know, more than a year, some parts at least, you know, a month. So the first thing we're going to do is just take a Scotch-Brite pad and go around the whole thing and just give it a quick scuff. So when we put our top coat on, it's going to stick a little bit better. So this is in no way, shape, or form, you know, a sanding, leveling operation. This is strictly abrading this primer so that the top coat will stick to it better. So that's done. Tomorrow when the sun comes up, we're going to push this thing outside. We're going to give it all a wash with some just basic soap and water, and I'll let you guys take a closer look at this thing under the bright sun. Good morning. It's a little bit earlier than I normally get up, but we're in a bit of a rush. So a little background on the kind of tactical situation we're dealing with here. It is November in Indiana. Now it's supposed to get up to about 70 degrees today, and that might very well be the last warm day that we get this year. So in order for paint to cure properly and all that, I'm gonna go try to knock this thing out all today. That's why we were in here working last night on scuffing and whatnot. So let's push it outside. We're gonna give it a quick wash down. Then we're gonna give it a couple hours to dry. Then I'm probably gonna take the front end off of this because it's easier to spray some of these parts separately, and it's only like 6 bolts to do it. First thing we gotta do is try to get this thing started. It hasn't started in, you know, a month probably, but should fire more or less right up when we throw a little bit of gas on the carburetor. The glorious L134 Go Devil 4-cylinder engine. So by modern standards, these are not very impressive, but you know, hey, it apparently only took about 60 horsepower to beat the Nazis. So when these things are brand new, they're good for, I think, 60, 65 horsepower, which this one is definitely not brand new. This is a civilian version of the engine. When you run the casting numbers on this, this is like from a 1953, I think, CJ3A, but the engines were all the same up until they started what they call the F-head, which is a little bit different design. I do have 2 correct World War II blocks for this and a couple of good World War II heads. I probably won't build those, but if and when I sell this, those will go with it. So somebody else can return it to real matching World War II glory. Let's remove our little air horn here. Throw a little bit of gas directly down the carburetor and see if we can't get this thing started real quick. Come on. A little more fuel. Because it hasn't started in a while, it's going to take a while to get fuel all the way up to the carb. Still in a fighting mood apparently. It just threw the GoPro off. There you go. She runs okay. It likes a little choke all the time, which is minorly annoying. And you know, it smokes. I've never really driven it enough to give the ring time to even try to reseat. I've got the seats out of this thing, so I threw this dude in there. We're gonna try to roll this out without me dying or getting stuck in my front yard. You might hear a knocking every now and then. What that is the exhaust pipe that's loose clanking against the bottom of the engine. Let's give you guys a little bit of a closer look in the sunlight. So like I said, this isn't normal, and guys who are, you know, old Jeep people are going to be able to identify some stuff that is not factory on this. You know, what's funny is it's not factory, but it's still vintage. This is probably like from J.C. Whitney out of the 60s or 70s for the snowplow kit. So these obviously also not factory wheels and tires. These are like Ford implement wheels that somebody cut the center section out of to make a little bit bigger so they would fit. I wouldn't trust them going 60 miles an hour down the highway, but I wouldn't trust anything on this going 60 miles an hour down the highway. This originally had a huge hole right here where they had stuck a civilian CJ tank through with a gas nozzle out the side. So all of this is either patch panel or like this section forward here I actually kind of hand hammered out myself, and it came out pretty good actually. So you can see where they patched the floor here, and the floor is the worst part of this. So Jeep way back when, because these things weren't designed to last, you know, 100 years, the frames actually have channels that have wood in the channels of the frame, and it just causes the bottoms of these things to rot as that wood rots. The back of mine's in pretty good shape. I've got it running out of a boat gas tank, which is pretty normal on these things, but I am maybe going to try to get it to run out of a jerry can just so it looks a little bit better, because I am not going through the process of putting the gas tank in these. These are fairly cheap to work on for the most part, but the gas tank is one of the things they are really proud of. They're like 500 bucks. So we can see I already did the dash with rattle can, the same paint. So the dash steering wheel, so we'll mask this stuff. You know, here's some stuff like I mentioned, like all these little weld holes that it's earned and dents and dings. It's gonna get to keep those. Gives it character. Rear bumper, not supposed to have one of those. Also not supposed to have a tailgate. So in the World War II Jeep world, they call this stuff Bubba mods. This just means Bubba got his hands on it over the years and did what he wanted to. So there's a lot of stuff like that that doesn't belong, but it's there now and it's gonna stay. It's part of the story of the vehicle. This area here, it's funny, I think I might have some pictures of it. I don't know what happened, but something dramatic happened here, and there was a whole bunch of brass that was brazed into it instead of Bondo. It did have a bunch of Bondo too, but I knocked all that stuff out and sanded down a lot of the brass, which is just neat. I've never come across that before. Come across lead, never brass. Here's a big one. Don't know what happened here. You know, there is every possibility that my hose is frozen, because while it's supposed to be 70 degrees today, it was not last night. Hey, we're in luck. Off to a good start. So all we're using here is Dawn dish soap. You know, normally I wash a car, I use some sort of dedicated soap, but we're just trying to degrease this a little bit and get any dirt and dust off of it. So just dish soap today. Now you may be wondering why I'm not painting the underside of the hood. And there actually is a reason for that. So if we get you in here close, this is one of the few places on the vehicle that I was able to find period correct lettering. So it's kind of hard to make out, but what this says is filled with Prestone, date 10/44. So this is when they winterized it in 1944, which is really, really cool. It's really hard to tell if these Jeeps went over and came back, or if they were just garrison Jeeps here. Most likely, from what I understand, if it's in the US, it never left. That's why there's actually a huge following for these things in Europe, because so many of them were left over there. There's a bunch of people who are into these things in England, in Holland. Norway's another big one. A lot of times when you sell these here from the States, people from, you know, those Scandinavian countries will buy them. Well, we're getting ready to rock and roll here. We'll let it dry in the sun, put some rudimentary masking on the thing. This is from Ron Fitzpatrick Jeep Parts. This is World War II olive drab lusterless enamel. This stuff's great, and honestly, RFJP's awesome in general. I've bought most of the stuff for that Jeep over the last few years from them. Their customer service is top notch. They have a lot of videos online for how to install their parts. Honestly, they have one for almost every part in their catalog, including this. So following one of those videos, we're gonna mix this at 4:1 with xylene. This is going into my Eastwood Concourse 2 gun. I've used this paint gun for a few projects. I really like it. Eastwood, again, they're phenomenal for the do-it-yourselfer, so I like to support them. They have great videos, they have great customer service, and like I said, I really like this gun. I've used it a couple times now. Now, we've kind of got a mixed bag on the weather. The hot rod gods granted us one more warm day of the year before it really gets chilly, but because they're a fickle bunch, they made it windy as hell. It's blowing at like 30 miles an hour out there. If this was any other project, I probably wouldn't go through with it. But that's the great thing about these old Jeeps, especially the World War II, especially the military Jeeps. They were painted in the field. Honestly, if you made it flawless, it wouldn't look right. That's why I'm willing to keep pressing forward with this project, even though we definitely don't have ideal conditions. One point I want to make before we get started, and I've said something like this in my other videos, I don't mean for this to be a tutorial. If you want to find detailed information about painting your vehicle, you can find that from much more professional paintists than I am. What I want this to be is a proof of concept. I am doing this in the worst conditions we really can. I'm not doing a whole lot of paint prep. I'm pushing it outside. We're not in a booth. It's windy. When we get done, I promise you it's going to look better than when we started. So if you're thinking about painting your car, I just don't want you to be afraid to do it. You can do as much research and put as much time and effort into it as you deem necessary for your project. If you've got a really nice car, yeah, you're going to want to spend more time, maybe pay a little bit more money for better equipment, but no matter if you're working on a really nice car or some old Jeep that you pulled out of a field in Wisconsin, you can make it happen. Don't be afraid to get started. The big moral that I want you to take away from this is that if your car looks bad, you can make it look better. That's it. Here we go. It's laying down really nice. The shadow's making it difficult in some spots for me to see where there's paint and where there's not, but we're gonna keep trucking along. We're gonna have to lay the windshield forward at some point. I might have to let it dry a little bit before that so I can get under some of that stuff. Let's keep going. Well, a couple hours later, that was a workout, but it looks pretty good. We're gonna let it sit out here and wind dry, but so far I'm pretty pleased with it. See you in a few days. Well, that's a new development. That would be brake fluid. Everything's a project. We're back. You can see she's all green now. We've given it a few days to let the paint cure good and hard. Had to work during the week, so I didn't get a chance to touch it very much. I know this is gonna shock my tens of subscribers out there, but yes, I do have a normal job. Soul-sucking normal job. But that's okay, because it's the weekend and we're gonna work on our Jeep again. So, we're gonna do a little bit more assembly. I have the front ends all back on, but we're gonna put the headlights in. This is for blackout lights. We're probably gonna throw those in. And then we're gonna do a little bit of wiring. We're gonna throw the seat in. I'm not sure that I'm gonna get to everything. I wanted to paint the wheels. I don't know if I'm gonna get to that or not. So we might just live with those as they are for now. Here's our big project for the day. This is a stencil kit from Kaiser Willys. So we're gonna go through and we're gonna stencil up our old Willys MB so it looks like it's ready to fight Nazis again. Okay, so one of the first things I'm gonna do here is we're gonna hang our headlight buckets back in. Now this still has the original wiring in it. That's the cloth wrapped wiring and it's shredded. Wouldn't be safe to use. And it was also, this is like most stuff from the 40s and 50s. This was originally a 6-volt system. It's been converted to 12. It's got an alternator and stuff on it, which purists might dislike, but it's just so much easier to deal with. So this is a 12-volt headlight, just a common off-the-shelf, you know, 6-inch, I think, round headlight. And then we also have replacement pigtails for the headlights. So we're gonna make this match so we can see that it's got its ground strap here. It's off that port. So we're gonna do the same thing. It's nice and color-coded on this for us, so it should be easy, black ground, no problem. The one thing to note is versus the 6-volt headlights, these 12-volt ones have knobs around. So I did some research on the internet because I'm definitely not the first to do this. A lot of this has been done by a lot of people. You do have to go in and notch the headlight bucket a little bit, which I definitely feel a little bit bad for grinding on real World War II material, but it is what it is. Do it as minimal as possible, and then it's hidden anyway. So these kind of have an interesting grounding system here. This little clip that's where your ground from your headlight goes onto. And then this rides like that, and then in theory this grounds you to the body, which then grounds you to the chassis. So in addition to putting this all back together, I'm also going to go in here and clean off all these surfaces that provide ground. So the headlights are held on with this swiveling bracket here. Your bolt goes through here, and that's held on with a nut. These Jeeps were made to be taken apart in the field with as few tools as possible. Now, I had to run a tap through both the nut and this stud here, which was not the easiest thing in the world to do. There's not a whole lot of place to grab on. Let's see if it'll go on now. That feels way better. It's not quite tight. I couldn't tap all the way down to the bottom on the stud, which I think is why I'm struggling now. Okay, so we got our one headlight bucket mounted in here securely now. So the next piece to go in on this side, these are really cool. These are original World War II blackout headlights. So when you couldn't have your brights on, when you couldn't have your full headlights on, because up top the Germans might have seen you and dropped a bomb on you, use these guys to reduce your visibility. Now, interestingly enough, when I got this Jeep, it did have a lot of its original wiring, I guess you could call it intact, even though it was a rat's nest, along with, you know, a bunch of farmer modifications over the years. But these worked. Now, I am not going to hook these up because these are made for 6-volt, and I do not want to blow these out. So for now, I'm just going to throw these in there. Maybe down the line, maybe we hook up some sort of inverter that would let us safely use these. But these are functional. I'm just not going to hook them up right now because I don't want to accidentally destroy them. I think that might be what this guy is as well, is another place where you would have a low visibility blackout type lamp, but I don't have that one. I can't remember for sure what this one is, but I think that's it. All right, this side should go in smoother. Turns out it needed a big lock washer, which is why I was struggling to get it tight at first because I didn't have enough take up in there. I also grabbed a standard ratchet. I love that ratchet you saw me using earlier with the swivel head 100-tooth snap-on ratchet, but there's kind of time and place where it's not very good, and this is one of those when you kind of need to use both your hands, and if it's wobbling around on you, it sucks. I'm also usually a power tool guy, so you're not cranking down and doing this, but with this old girl, and I'm using original fasteners where I can, you just don't want to snap anything off. Alright, so now we put this down here. Before you tighten it all the way down, there's some play, so you just kind of adjust it to get it where you want. Okay, so there's where that's going to sit, so now we loosen this up just a little bit more, pull that forward. That looks pretty good. Now we tighten it all the way down. Let's get you guys in here to see this. Oh yeah, that looks good. All right, getting started here on our stencils. I threw on our little wooden blocks. What that does is when you lay the hood down or when you have the hood up, now this contacts the wood instead of laying metal on metal. And you know, a lot of this stuff I've had for years just sitting in boxes. So it's nice to be able to actually use some parts that I've spent money on. This is what's called an invasion star. Because I don't know the exact history of this Jeep and I couldn't find much for markings, I was able to find some little snippets where it said USA and the serial number here on the, or the hood number, it's not serial number, but the hood number on the side, but I couldn't get any whole numbers. Now, interestingly, what I could find wasn't white, it was in blue drab, which is how they left the factory. And this is an early 43 Jeep. This is like late January, early February 43 Jeep based on the serial number. None of them, I think, until after 43, or maybe it was even after post-war, like 45-ish, left with white letters. But a lot of them did get white letters later in the field. You can go down a real deep rabbit hole on figuring out when letters changed and what happened in the field and what motor pools did versus how they left the factory. So this isn't going to be exact. If you want to poke holes in what I'm doing, you're going to be able to. You know, maybe it shouldn't have an invasion star. The invasion star is the broken circle star. There's also a full circle star, and then there's just a star with no circle around it. I'm just doing what looks cool here. I also had to go in and find some sleeves. It got a little bit chilly outside. So this is stencil tape. We're gonna start holding this down with this. I think the only real difference is it's not as tacky as like masking tape would be, so you can lift up and put it down again much easier than you could with masking tape. This is a pretty big stencil and it's kind of complicated, so I'm really gonna do my best to make this lay down and not have a ton of overspray or underspray, I guess, under the stencil. So one of the nice things about working with these old Jeeps, especially if you're just learning with paint or body, I actually taught myself to weld a lot on this Jeep, because unlike most cars, there's actually a lot of flat panels on it where a lot of vehicles there aren't. Now, learning to weld is relative here because I'm still not much of a welder, but I learned to stick two pieces of metal together with a hot stick on this vehicle. And sort of the same thing with paint. When I posted a picture of this after I'd fogged it green on one of the Jeep forums, they said, well, we know it's not a factory paint job because there's not enough runs in it. Which is pretty funny, but it's true. These things, when they came either from the factory or were worked on legit in the field in the motor pool, they're sprayed outside, just like I sprayed mine. And these stencils, you know, people didn't take their time with them. They were trying to do stuff as quickly as they can in adverse conditions. While I'm taking my time a little bit here, there's no point in messing around trying to make this perfect, because the more perfect it is, the more wrong it's going to look. So again, this is an awesome vehicle to learn on. All right, moving right along here. So this is like shockingly labor intensive. It's not particularly hard, it just takes forever. And I don't have two numbers, so any place I want to repeat numbers, I have to just stop. So altogether, this is going to be 8 letters here. And I know I wanted to end in 138. If you know, you know. But I'm already using my 3, so I'm going to have to come back after I spray this and go 3 and 8 on the end there. And then obviously I'm going to have to do the whole thing again on the other side. And then we have a bunch of, there's some debate over whether it should be 2-inch or 3-inch letters. I'm using the 3-inch because that seems that most of the ones where you paint in white letters, and they probably did it in the field, that's going to be more correct, if you want to call that correct. They did leave the factory with 2-inch letters, but because I'm painting mine in white and it's going to be more of a motor pool type restoration here, I'm using the 3s. For our paint, we're using some basic Rust-Oleum. This is a semi-gloss satin paint. This is just kind of what everybody recommended online. Factory, it would have been a grease paint, but we're not messing with that. We're going easy button here and just using spray paint. Here we go. I wish it was a little bit warmer. It's about 50 degrees, a little bit warmer than that. 60 is probably 50 in the garage. I thought about pushing it out in the sun, but let's just rock and roll. You can already see that I'm getting some overspray where I don't want. So for my overspray, now I'll try to mask this better when I do the other side. I didn't think it was going to spray over this bad, but I've got some mineral spirits on a rag, and the mineral spirits takes off the new paint easy, but doesn't affect the dry paint that's already on there, or at least not very much. I'm probably still going to go over it and just spray it with some basic glass cleaner afterwards, just to make sure the mineral spirits doesn't have the effect on my nice green paint job. So newly armed with our knowledge that this spray can is not exactly precise, we've done a little bit more masking, brought to you by Summit Racing. And we're going to try our Liberation Star. Look at all those little spatters. That's what's causing me problems. All right, that's enough of the painting. Let's just assume that I spent several more hours spray painting and wiping down overspray with mineral spirits, and let's get to the fun part. Let's get these knobby tires out in the dirt where they belong.
These things aren't the smoothest riding vehicles in the world. Really kind of like driving a tractor faster than you should.
I'm gonna get a tick on me, aren't I? I think I can feel the Lyme disease hitting already. It's okay. So we're out here with our 43 MB, letting her eat a little bit, and she's doing great. Four-wheel drive works, four-wheel high and four-wheel low both work. She's not insured, so I can't drive it on the road. Plus, if I'm honest, this thing kind of scares me to drive more than like 30 miles an hour. It's not the smoothest ride in the world. She bangs you around quite a bit, but it's a lot of fun. So we're just out here basically in the woods banging around. She looks absolutely great though, out here in the OD green, in the sunshine, for the first time in who knows how long. I mean, because this thing had at least 6 different coats of paint on it, none of them the proper green, aside from the very first one. I feel great to have her back in her real color with a hood number on, Liberty Star on the front, banging around in the dirt like she's supposed to. Let's have some more fun.
Come on. Gotta let her eat. That hill got us in two-wheel drive. We're gonna throw it in 4. I always have to look at the diagram.
Where are you? There we go.